first saw the challenge in a comment thread on a video titled Top 5 Weirdest TikTok Urban Legends. Someone had posted a reply that simply read, "Just stay one night. $500 cash. Real deal." And below that a phone number. No links, no hashtags, no branding. It didn't look like an ad. Just a dare that got buried in a sea of jokes and skepticism. I was 3 weeks into unemployment, halfway through a Red Bull, and had just been ghosted by a company that promised they were excited to move forward. So yeah, I called the number. A man answered on the third ring. Calm, polite, like he was expecting me. He confirmed my name somehow before I gave it. Said he only had one spot left, and if I was serious, I'd need to show up by sundown the following evening. I asked if this was some content house prank, like a Mr. Beast knockoff. And he just chuckled and said, "We don't film." He texted me the address and 2 words. Show up. No waivers, no signature, no rules. Not yet. The place was about an hour outside town, hidden off a long gravel path that Google Maps didn't register until I was halfway down it. I kept losing signal, even though I was only a few miles from a decent cell tower. When the trees cleared, I saw the house. It looked wrong. Not haunted house wrong. Not horror movie wrong, just uncanny. The shingles were too uniform. The lawn was too perfect. The air was completely still, like the world around it had hit pause. And somehow I knew it wasn't just empty, it was waiting. I got out of the car and immediately felt the silence press down. No birds, no wind, not even the ticking of my engine. On the porch sat a single folding chair with a small black envelope on it. Inside 5 crisp $100 bills. And a note. Step inside. Lock the door behind you. That was the first rule. Nothing fancy. No signature. Just clear handwriting like a teacher's notes on an exam. I hesitated, of course. Looked around for a prank crew. A hidden GoPro, even a neighbor watching from a second-floor window. Nothing. Just the house, the porch, and the money in my hands. I stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me on its own, but I locked the deadbolt anyway. The key was already in it. I figured that was it. I'd crash on the couch, make it through sunrise, and cash out. But I didn't find a couch. The house was bigger on the inside. The kind of bigger you feel before you can see it. Hallways that didn't match the outside layout. Doors slightly ajar that led into rooms too deep for this kind of foundation. There were no lights on. Just the dull red-orange glow of sunset bleeding through gauzy curtains. On a hallway table just past the entryway sat a small square frame. It held one sentence. "Welcome. Do not forget Rule 1. The frame didn't have a price tag. There was no signature on the back. I didn't see it again after I turned the corner, and when I doubled back to find it, it was gone, like the house had made its point. I checked my phone. No bars. Time 6:19 p.m. Battery 92%. That would change. But for now, I was still pretending this was a game. A test. One I could ace just by being quiet, staying still, and following instructions. What I didn't realize, the rules hadn't been fully written yet. They were still adapting. I wandered deeper into the house, thinking maybe I'd find a sign-in sheet or a bedroom labeled Challenge Participant or something. But it wasn't like that. The place wasn't trying to impress me or intimidate me. Just existed. Like it had always been waiting for someone like me to walk through the door. The furniture looked like it had been arranged decades ago and never touched again. A low velvet couch with gold trim sat under a portrait of a family I didn't recognize. The painting was black and white, but the eyes had been colored in just the irises. Too blue, too bright. I avoided looking at it for long. A tall wooden grandfather clock stood in the corner, ticking too fast. Not broken, just impatient. I found a staircase to the left that curved gently out of view, leading up to a second floor I swore hadn't been visible from outside. There was no light at the top, but I thought I saw movement in the shadows, like something pulling away, just as I turned my head. That's when I found Rule 2. It wasn't on paper this time. It was carved into the wooden railing of the stairs. Do not acknowledge the upstairs. The letters were precise, old, like they'd been there since the house was built. I stood at the base of the staircase for a long time, debating whether acknowledge meant look, climb, or something else entirely. I'd already looked. Did that count? I decided not to test it. Instead, I turned into what might have been the living room. A tall bookshelf sat against one wall, but all the books were blank. Dozens of them, identical spines, identical size, not a single printed word on the pages. On the fireplace mantel was a photo of a man in a suit standing in front of a door. The same door I'd just walked through, only in the photo there was no house around it. Just the door standing alone in a field of dry grass, and the man smiling too widely. Beneath the photo was a brass plaque. It read, "He was the first to look upstairs." My skin prickled. I turned and walked quickly into the next room. That's when I noticed something strange. The furniture had moved. The couch from the front room was now in the dining room. The clock from the hallway was now beside a curtained window. I know what you're thinking, maybe I just got turned around. Old houses can be disorienting, but I remembered where everything was. I had a weirdly sharp mental image of the layout, probably my brain trying to ground itself in the unfamiliar. And this didn't match. I doubled back. Sure enough, the first room was now empty. The portrait, gone. The couch, gone. Even the color of the wallpaper had changed, faded green now, ochre yellow. I wasn't alone in this house. I didn't feel watched. Not exactly. It was worse. I felt guided, like something was always 2 steps ahead, moving objects just out of view to see if I'd notice. Testing how carefully I was paying attention. The sun dipped lower and the house adjusted to match. The lighting dimmed, not all at once, but gradually like dusk was being poured inside through a funnel. I started back toward the front door, just to make sure it was still there. It wasn't. In its place was a smooth, unbroken wall. Same wallpaper, same baseboard, no hinges, no knob. I touched the spot where the door had been half expecting it to just swing open if I pushed hard enough. The wall was cold, unmoving. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. Time 6:44 p.m. Battery 87%. I slid the phone into my back pocket and said out loud stupidly, "Okay, I get it." From upstairs, something creaked. Not footsteps. Just one long, groaning shift in the floorboards. Something stretching. I backed into the kitchen where the cabinets were all slightly ajar. Inside each a single item. One cabinet held a feather, another a cracked teacup, another a folded page from a magazine I swear I read as a kid. Things I wasn't sure were real until I saw them. Things that seemed like bait. And in the center of the kitchen table was a note. New, still curling at the edges from fresh ink. "You are being watched. Do not wave at the mirror." I turned slowly toward the kitchen window, and there it was. A mirror propped up on the sill like it had always been part of the design. But it wasn't a mirror. Not exactly, because I wasn't in it. Only the room was. The table, the chair, the cabinets, but no me. Until finally, after 3 full seconds, my reflection walked in. It paused, then smiled, and waved. I didn't wave back. I backed away from the mirror without turning around. I didn't want to break eye contact. Something about it felt important. Like if I looked away, it might move faster. My reflection stayed put, still smiling, still waving. It wasn't a friendly wave. It was mechanical, like something copying the gesture without understanding it. And it kept going, long after any normal person would stop. I ducked around the corner into the hallway and took a deep breath. The house hadn't attacked me, not yet, but it was studying me. That much was obvious now, and it wasn't just playing with space and time. It was testing responses, watching how I reacted when things moved, when faces smiled without permission, when the world shifted just a little too far from what I remembered. I didn't want to panic, not yet, so I did something stupid. I called out hello. The moment the word left my mouth, I regretted it. From the living room, the grandfather clock stopped ticking, then started again. But now it ticked backward. I stepped into the dining room. Everything had changed again. The table was round now, not rectangular. The chairs were facing the windows instead of inward. And there was a new piece of paper, taped to the back of the chair closest to me. Rule 3, do not speak your own name, not even once. I froze, because I had, not just now, but earlier, on the phone. When the man confirmed my name and I laughed and repeated it back. Yeah, that's me, I'd said. Tyler. There was a moment of stillness then, followed by the slow hiss of something sliding against glass. I turned. The mirror from the kitchen had moved. It now sat on the dining room table, and this time my reflection wasn't waving. It was mouthing something, over and over. I couldn't hear it, but I didn't have to. It was my name. Tyler, Tyler, Tyler. I turned it face down and left the room. I didn't want to see what happened if it said it louder. I wandered deeper into the house. The hallways had started looping. I passed the same dusty painting 3 times, even though I took different turns. One of the hallway doors had no knob. Another was missing completely, just a blank frame filled with concrete. I kept walking until I found the room with the fire. I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe it wasn't there until I needed it. The fireplace was burning already. The flames gave off heat, but no light. A small white envelope sat on the mantel. Inside, another note. You've broken a rule. The house is now listening more closely. That wasn't all. Taped to the inside of the envelope was a thin strip of Polaroid film. A photo of me, standing in the dining room, looking at the mirror. Only in the photo, the reflection had already stood up, and it was behind me. I dropped the photo and backed away from the fire. The flames rose higher for a moment, like the house was laughing. Then they dimmed again, and the hallway behind me changed. Where there had once been wallpaper, there was now writing, scrawled along the length of the wall in looping cursive as if done by a giant hand. Rule 4, do not ask who else is here. I whispered to myself, Jesus Christ, and that's when I heard it. A knock from inside the wall. Just once, then silence. Didn't move, didn't breathe. Waited to hear it again, but there was only the soft crackle of fire and the thump of my own pulse. I backed into the living room, at least what I thought was the living room. It was darker than before. The windows were gone. So was the front door. In their place were tall bookshelves filled now with books that weren't blank. Every title had my name. Just that. Tyler. Hundreds of them. I pulled one down and flipped through. The pages were filled with lines of text. He turns left when he should go right. He forgets what he said 10 minutes ago. He does not remember the face behind the curtain. He looks for exits that don't exist. Each sentence felt like it was being written as I read it. At the very bottom of the page, he reads this line and doesn't understand. He was never alone. I dropped the book, and behind me something whispered, "Tyler." I didn't turn around. Because I remembered the rule, I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes forward, locked on the bookshelf, even as my name echoed behind me again, this time closer. It was my voice. That was the worst part. Perfectly matched. Same cadence. Same crack at the end of the second syllable. I've heard it enough in voicemails and late-night video calls to recognize every nuance. But it wasn't coming from me, and it wasn't mocking. It sounded patient, like it had all the time in the world for me to turn around. I didn't. Instead, I stepped sideways, keeping my shoulder to the shelf, watching the floor for movement. Nothing shifted, nothing creaked, but the air felt too thick to breathe. Like the house was holding me inside its lungs. The mirror had moved again. Now it leaned against the far wall, tilted slightly toward the ceiling, as though someone had placed it there in a hurry. I could just barely make out my reflection from across the room, still motionless, still smiling. I walked into what should have been the hallway. The doorframe was gone. A blank stretch of wallpaper stood where the exit should have been, trapped. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone again. Still no signal. Battery 77%. Time 9:44 p.m. But that was impossible. I'd only been inside maybe an hour. Had I tried to scroll through recent photos, see if I had evidence of my arrival. Anything that could anchor me to time. There were 3 new pictures I didn't take. All black and white. Grainy. One was of me standing at the fireplace. One was me asleep on the couch. And the last one, blurry but unmistakable, was me standing in the hallway with someone behind me. Not someone, something. It had no face, just a smooth surface where a face should be. Like a mannequin left half-finished. Tall, slouched, arms too long for its frame. In the picture, it was reaching out toward me. I locked the phone, slid it into my pocket without looking again. That's when the bookshelf slid to the left, exposing a hidden room behind it. I didn't question how or why. The house wanted me to see it, so I stepped through. The hidden room was smaller than I expected. Just a single desk, a chair, and a black binder placed dead center on the surface. There was dust on everything except the binder. It was pristine. On the front in silver lettering, Participant 413, active. I opened it. The first page was blank. The second page listed a single sentence. You broke Rule 3. Underneath it, my full name, typed perfectly, exactly as I'd said it. I flipped the page. Consequences pending. The house is aware of you now. My mouth went dry. The next page had a new heading. Rule 5. If the lights turn red, stop moving. I stared at the sentence for a full 10 seconds, letting it settle into my mind like a brand. If the lights turn red, stop moving. I closed the binder and stepped back into the living room. The fire was gone. Only cold ashes remained, and above the fireplace hung a new photo. I didn't want to look, but I had to. It was me, but older. Not aged exactly, just worn down. Paler, thinner. Eyes, sunken skin drawn tight across my cheekbones. And in the photo, I wasn't alone. That same faceless figure stood beside me, hand on my shoulder. The photo was labeled Observer Initiate. Something cracked above me. The ceiling shifted just slightly, like weight was being redistributed. Then the lights turned red. Every bulb, every lamp, even the ambient light from the fireplace flickered into a dim crimson glow. I froze, didn't breathe, didn't blink. Behind me, the sound of bare feet across tile. Deliberate, sticky. They stopped just behind my right shoulder. I felt something lean in slowly, like it was savoring the moment. Its breath was cold, but I stayed still for 30 full seconds. Then the red light blinked off. The house exhaled, and the normal yellow glow returned. I turned around slowly. There was nothing there. No footprints, no figure, but the mirror had moved again. Now it was behind me, propped on the mantel facing directly into the room. And for the first time, it didn't reflect anything at all. Just black, deep, bottomless. And from that black, I heard my voice again. Not out loud, but in my head. You're part of it now. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. The house never darkened completely. The lights dimmed to a soft amber around 1:00 a.m., as if giving me permission to rest. But every time I closed my eyes, I could feel something moving in the walls. Not pacing, shifting. Like the house was changing shape again, rearranging the floor plan, preparing a new version of itself to test me further. So I stayed on the couch, curled beneath a heavy wool blanket. I didn't remember pulling over myself, staring at the cold fireplace. The ashes hadn't stirred since the fire went out, but they no longer looked like wood residue. They were too fine, powdery like cremains. At 2:17 a.m., the lights flickered red again. I froze, remembering Rule 5, the one from the binder. If the lights turned red, stop moving. I didn't move. This time, the house made it harder. From the back hallway came the sound of laughter. Children's laughter. Too loud. Too clean. No echoes like it had been dubbed over the scene with perfect audio quality. It grew closer. Not playful, predictable. On a loop. Laugh, giggle, squeal, repeat. It moved into the kitchen. I didn't look. The lights turned white, and the sound stopped. I breathed again, but only for a moment, because someone was sitting in the armchair across from me. I didn't hear them arrive. The cushions didn't creak. They just appeared. A silhouette. No features. Legs crossed like they belonged there. They were watching me, or I was watching myself. The figure had my posture, my proportions, even the same scuffed shoes I wore. But I couldn't see a face, only the top of their head angled down toward their lap. In their hands was the binder, my binder. I stood up slowly, walked toward the figure one step at a time. When I reached the chair, it was empty. The binder sat in its place. This time the front read, Updated Terms, Cycle 1A. Integration begins. Inside was only one page. Rule 6, burn one item you brought. The house will choose which. Check my pockets, my phone wallet keys. They were all still there. But on the floor next to the fireplace was my hoodie. Folded neatly. I hadn't taken it off. I hadn't removed it. The house had. I picked it up. It was still warm. I looked toward the fireplace. The fire had restarted. Low, blue, like it was waiting. The rules weren't suggestions. I knew that now. I dropped the hoodie into the flames. It didn't catch at first. Then it shivered like it had a heartbeat and vanished, not burned. Erased. The fire flared once hot enough to singe the air, then went cold again, and something new took its place on the mantel. A key, old, brass, no label, just a tag with a small symbol, a circle with a line through it. I picked it up, Behind me, a door appeared. Not opened, appeared. There was no door in the far wall of the living room before. Just wallpaper. Now a solid wooden frame with a keyhole that matched the key in my hand. I didn't want to open it, but the house hadn't given me a choice so far. I turned the key. The door opened into blackness. Not just darkness, absence. Like light couldn't exist past the threshold. And from that black a whisper. "Welcome, Tyler." I hadn't said my name since Rule 3. I didn't have to. The house knew it now, and it was using it. I stepped back. The door stayed open. The darkness inside didn't move. But I knew if I waited long enough, something in it would. So I closed the door, locked it. The key vanished from my hand the moment the latch clicked, and behind me the fireplace whispered, "Good, you're learning." I didn't speak for the rest of the night. I didn't need to. The house was doing all the talking now through the lights, the walls, the notes, the shifting layout. And I'd learned that the more I spoke, the more it responded. It didn't want conversation. It wanted compliance. By the time the sun rose, or what passed for sunrise in this place, I was already awake sitting at the kitchen table, watching the second hand on my phone's clock twitch every few seconds like it wasn't sure which direction to go. 6:33 a.m., 6:34, 6:32, 6:35, 6:33. I gave up trying to use it. When I opened the fridge, it had changed again. The shelves were bare, except for a single item on the center rack, a small glass jar sealed with wax. Inside was a thick black liquid that didn't move when I shook it, like it had too much gravity, like it was heavier than it should have been. There was a label on the lid, "Drink only when the house goes quiet." I set it back and shut the fridge gently, trying not to make a sound. That's when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps. Not from the front door, it was still gone. This came from the far hallway where I'd first seen the staircase. I walked toward it carefully, avoiding the 4th floorboard from the left. It creaked now, even though it hadn't before. The staircase was gone. In its place was a wall, but the knock came again. 3 taps, then silence. Then the light bulb overhead flickered red. I froze. Rule 5. If the lights turn red, stop moving. I stood still for what felt like minutes. The red light bathed the hallway in a dull, blood-warm glow. I could hear the house shifting around me, groaning in its joints, like a thing waking up slowly. Then the knock returned. This time it was from behind me, right behind me. Not on the wall, on me. 3 taps, soft but firm on my left shoulder. I didn't flinch, didn't move. I kept my eyes forward, staring at the wall that used to be a staircase, until the light turned yellow again, and the presence behind me drifted away, like fog pulled through a vent. I exhaled. My legs nearly buckled beneath me. Back in the living room, the fire had gone out again. On the mantel sat another note resting exactly where the key had been. It read, Rule 7. Don't listen to the person who sounds like you. That hit harder than I expected. Because last night when I heard my name whispered from the darkness, that hadn't just been my voice. It had been my tone, my breath, the exact way I say things when I'm nervous. It even cracked the second syllable of Tyler like I always do when I haven't slept. The house wasn't mimicking me. It was recording me. And now it could speak as me. From anywhere, I wandered the house again, trying to reset, trying to learn the new layout. The hallway bathroom was gone now. In its place was a small reading nook. Cozy, fireplace armchair and bookshelves. But the books weren't right. Every single one had a title pulled from my memories papers I'd written in school stories I'd forgotten I loved, even a yearbook I lost in a move a decade ago. I opened one. The pages were blank, except for the last. One sentence typed in courier. You're easier to keep when you're comfortable. I closed the book slowly, then heard my voice again, this time from the kitchen. Hey, I found something. The tone was casual, familiar. The way I speak when I'm excited to show someone a dumb video or a weird news article. But I was alone. I didn't respond. Instead, I pressed myself flat against the wall and waited. Footsteps approached, slow, heavy, matching my weight perfectly. Then silence, then a whisper just beyond the corner. Come on, man, don't make this weird. I held my breath, and just like that, it was gone. When I returned to the kitchen, the fridge was humming again. The jar was still there, still sealed, still full. The house hadn't gone quiet yet, but it would, eventually. I couldn't say how long it had been anymore. The house wasn't playing by time's rules, and my phone's clock had finally given up altogether. It blinked, 1:11 constantly. Now morning or night, it made no difference. Outside the windows, the light shifted every few hours, but never in the same direction. The sky would go blue-gray, then pitch black, then a flickering yellow like a broken fluorescent bulb. I started writing notes to myself. Little things, reminders, timestamps that didn't rely on devices. Slept crossed out. Fire still dead. Don't speak first. Do not say name, even in your head. The last one I underlined 3 times, because earlier that day, if you could call it that, I'd almost said it out loud. Just in frustration, just muttering under my breath. But I caught myself at the last second, and when I did, I felt something shift in the ceiling above me, like a breath drawn in, waiting. It was hunting for cracks in my memory. I started moving less. Every hallway was a gamble now. A path that once led to the reading nook now opened into a room I didn't recognize. Walls lined with TV screens, all black. No cords, no controls. But one screen flickered on when I walked in. It showed me in the kitchen looking at the fridge. Except I wasn't moving, and I wasn't wearing the same shirt. It was an old hoodie, the hoodie I had burned. I stood in front of the screen, frozen. Then the figure turned and looked at the camera. At me. It raised its hand and pointed directly outward, toward where I stood. Then all the other screens turned on at once, all showing the same image me in various rooms, at slightly different times. Like the house had stitched together versions of my movement, and was now playing them back. In one, I slept on the floor. In another, I banged on the wall until my hands bled. In the third, I sat at the table, head in my hands, while another me paced the room behind me. None of these things had happened, but they might, or maybe they had. Backed out of the room and slammed the door. The hallway was different again, longer. No pictures, just dark wood paneling and soft floorboards that didn't make a sound when I walked. No echo, no feedback. As if the house didn't want me to know I was moving. At the end of the hall, a door was open. The only open door I'd seen since arriving. Inside was a small bedroom. Single bed, white sheets, no pillow, and on the mattress a fresh page neatly folded. I opened it with shaking hands. Rule 8. If you hear your own voice behind you, run. I didn't even finish the last word before I heard it. From the hallway. Whispered, just 3 words. Where are you going? My voice. But not tired, not scared. Playful, confident, like someone who already knew the ending. I bolted. No plan, no direction, just ran. The hallway didn't try to stop me. It bent. It cooperated. Guided me past doorways that had been sealed. Back into the kitchen where the fridge was humming louder than ever. I yanked the door open. The jar was gone. In its place, a note. Now that the house is quiet, drink. I looked around. The lights were dimmed. The fire was out. No voices, no footsteps, no laughter. I hadn't noticed the silence creeping in, but now it wrapped itself around me like a cold coat. The house was giving me a moment, a test. I opened the drawer beside the fridge and found the jar, wrapped in a kitchen towel, still sealed. I hesitated, then unscrewed the wax top and took a sip. The liquid was bitter, metallic, and impossibly cold. The moment it hit my tongue, the kitchen changed. The fridge turned off. The cabinet slammed shut, and in the reflection of the microwave door, I saw it. Not me, not a version of me. Something else entirely. A shape I'd never seen before. Not in mirrors, not in screens, but one that had been inside me since I arrived. Its face leaned close to the reflection and spoke in my voice. Now you belong to the quiet. I dropped the jar. It didn't shatter. It didn't even bounce. It just vanished. Mid-fall. Like the moment it left my hand, the house took it back. The towel it was wrapped in lay limp on the floor, already dry. I stood there dizzy. The kitchen swayed gently like the floor had become a ship's deck. I braced myself against the fridge, but it no longer felt solid. The metal hummed under my fingers like it was wired into something alive, something breathing. I stumbled into the hallway. Every surface looked slightly off now, warped. The walls bowed inward. The corners weren't 90 degrees anymore. My shadow stretched the wrong direction no matter where I stood. The silence deepened. It wasn't peaceful. It was expectant. I knew something had changed after drinking from the jar. My thoughts weren't just mine anymore. They came slower, like I was thinking through syrup or through someone else. The lights above flickered briefly, and when they did, the hallway grew 5 feet longer. Literally. The floorboards extended themselves. The ceiling rolled back, and then a door appeared at the end. It was red, peeling paint, brass knob, a handmade sign nailed across the top. Do not open for anyone. I should have turned around, but I was already walking toward it. My hands trembled, not with fear, with anticipation, as if part of me had been waiting for this moment all along. I stopped inches from the door. My breath clouded the air even though the house was warm. From the other side, a knock, just once, then again, then a voice. My voice. Please, it's me. I'm locked out. Let me in. The air behind me shifted. The lights stayed off. I backed away, bumping into a shelf I didn't remember passing. All the books on it had my name again, but the titles had changed. Tyler's Third Night. Tyler Forgets Rule 6. Tyler Opens the Wrong Door. The last one was blank inside, still waiting to be written. Another knock at the red door. Then a whisper. If you don't let me in, it will. I turned away, and something growled softly from the other side of the door. Not human, not my voice, not anything that had ever lived above ground. I ran, didn't look back, took a hard left and found myself in the bathroom, the one that hadn't existed since my first day. The mirror was fogged over even though the room was cold. I wiped it clean. No reflection, just static, like a TV stuck between channels. And behind the white noise, faint and rhythmic, was the sound of typing. I leaned closer, and the static faded to reveal a screen, a blog post, a title. I joined a stay overnight for 500 challenge. Now I can't leave. Beneath it, paragraphs. Words I hadn't written, but they were my thoughts. Verbatim. Even the hesitation, even the doubts. It was transcribing me in real time. It was recording me. In the reflection, a cursor blinked. Then it typed, Rule 9. You are the story now. I stumbled back. The mirror went black. The bathroom was gone. Just gone. I stood in an empty hallway where it used to be, and the lights flickered back to life, this time in pale green. A new color, a new face. The house was done testing. Now it was teaching, and I was the lesson. I don't remember how I got to the library. I didn't walk there. Or if I did, the hallway connected itself while I wasn't paying attention. But I blinked, and suddenly I was standing in front of a set of tall glass doors with frosted panes and golden handles shaped like quills. I knew what it was the moment I saw it. A place for storage, not just of books of stories, versions of people like me. The glass doors swung open without a sound. Inside the room stretched on forever. Shelves taller than any ladder could reach, all stacked with books bound in worn leather. Some cracked, others pristine. No titles on the spines, only dates. And sometimes, names. Names I recognized. Some from the envelope when I arrived. Some I didn't realize I knew until I saw them written there. The first shelf was marked, Initiates 1973-1982. A whole row of people who tried before me, who failed. Or worse, who succeeded, depending on what the house really wanted. I walked down the central aisle. The air was heavy with paper, and something older. Something moldy and faintly sweet, like dried roses in a sealed box. Then I saw my name. A full section labeled Tyler L. 5 volumes, each larger than the last. I picked one up, the second volume. Open to the first page. He thinks he still has choices. He thinks this is a test of endurance, of rules. But the house doesn't measure time, it measures patterns. He is 38% complete. The next page was blank, and then ink began to appear. Right there in front of me. More words. My thoughts. The way I was reading. The way my hands were shaking. My hesitation. My breathing. It was watching. Not just my actions, but my reactions. The house was documenting everything. A living archive. I slammed the book shut. The lights above flickered blue. I didn't know what blue meant yet, but the air got colder fast. My breath came out in short bursts. Behind me, a rustle. Soft. Paper scraping paper. I turned, and one of the shelves had opened like a door. Inside was a room. Not large, just big enough for a table and a chair. And sitting in the chair was me. Or a version of me. Face pale. Eyes glazed. Mouth slightly open. The figure didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Didn't move. It held a pencil in one hand, poised over a blank notebook. On the first line was scrawled, Tyler L., Cycle 2 candidate. The pencil scribbled something, but the figure hadn't moved. I backed away. The figure looked up and smiled, then spoke in my exact voice. Almost there. The door slammed shut. The lights snapped to white. The hallway behind me had vanished, and in its place another mirror, cracked down the center, but it still reflected me. Only this time my reflection was writing. Writing in a book I wasn't holding, and across the glass backwards, but clear the title read. Rule 10, finish your story before the house does. I turned and ran. No direction, just movement. Forward, backward, it didn't matter anymore. The house bent, folded. Rooms repeated. Furniture dissolved into mist. Time unraveled. When I finally stopped, I found myself in the front hallway again. Only now the front door had returned. I stumbled toward it, put my hand on the knob. It turned. It actually turned. I pulled, and the door opened into a hallway. Not a porch, not the driveway, just another hallway, identical to the one behind me. Another layer, another level, and far at the end, another version of me frozen in mid-step, staring at the same door, hand on the knob, eyes wide with a single thought. This time it lets me leave. But I already knew the truth. There was no leaving, because now I was part of the library. I stayed in the hallway longer than I should have, watching that other version of me still frozen at the far end, like a wax figure left under museum lights. He never blinked, never moved, just stood there caught in that perfect illusion of almost escape. Wondered how many like him there were. Versions that thought they could leave. Versions that almost did. But almost was just a shape the house liked to use. Something it dangled like a key on a string, just long enough to make us move forward. And then it would shift the walls again. Trap reset. Hope reset. I turned away. That's when I saw the door on my left. It hadn't been there before. It was metal. Industrial. Like it belonged in a facility, not a house. No doorknob. Just a single word embossed in all caps across the face. Intake. Under it, a narrow black slit, like a mail slot, or something worse. A paper slowly slid out from it, curling at the edge. I didn't want to touch it, but I didn't stop myself. The paper read, Rule 11, do not open doors labeled with all caps. Too late. The door didn't open. But the hallway behind me changed. I didn't notice it at first. The temperature dropped. That was the first sign. Then the air grew thick with a strange, sharp smell, like dried ink and ozone. I turned. The hallway had gone darker, and now there were drawings on the walls. Dozens of them. Children's sketches. Crude figures holding hands. Some standing beside houses. Some lying in beds, some burning, and every drawing had the same signature in the corner. Tyler. I hadn't drawn these, but my handwriting was unmistakable, and some of the drawings were from memories I hadn't thought about in years. The bunk bed from my first apartment, the alley behind my school, my childhood dog, each scrawled in thick crayon strokes. Surrounded by black stick figures with long arms and no faces. In one of them, I was inside a house, scratched in blood-red marker. He never left. I backed away from the drawings. One of them fluttered off the wall and landed at my feet. I picked it up. It was blank, but slowly a new image appeared as if drawn by invisible hands. This time it showed me at the dining table, looking at a mirror. This hadn't happened yet. It was a scene waiting to happen, and I knew what that meant. The house wasn't just recording me. It was writing me, writing my story ahead of me, filling in the blanks before I could make my own decisions. I ran again. Every corner now bent too far, stretched like taffy, pulling me deeper into corridors that weren't lit, weren't mapped. Eventually, I landed in a new room. Circular, high ceiling, a skylight above, but the sky it showed wasn't real, just an endless static gray. In the center of the room was a table. On it, a pile of objects. My phone dead and cracked. The key I thought had vanished. A cracked mirror shard, and a thick leather-bound book titled Final Rules, Draft. I opened it. The pages were empty, except one. Just one in the center. Rule 12. When the house stops changing, you're no longer a guest. I closed the book, looked around. The room wasn't changing. The walls weren't shifting. The floor was solid beneath me. The house had stopped, which meant I was no longer passing through it. I had become part of it, like the drawings, like the figures in the books, like the static-filled versions of myself in the screens. The air pulsed once, a heartbeat I didn't recognize. And from the far end of the room, another door opened. No sound, no fanfare, just a quiet invitation. I stepped toward it, and above it burned into the wood. Exit. But I didn't believe it. Not anymore. Because I had seen the word exit before. Above fake doors. Inside the library. Even in my dreams. They were always lies. But still, I walked through. Because maybe this time was different. I stepped through the door marked exit. And for a moment, just a moment, it felt real. There was grass under my feet. Real grass. Not a carpet printed with the idea of grass, but cool, damp blades that brushed against my ankles as I moved forward. A breeze hit my face. Actual air, carrying with it the faint smell of dew and earth. It felt like morning. I was standing in a wide open field surrounded by trees. The sky was pale pink just before sunrise. No clouds, no flickering, no glitches. Didn't make sense, but I didn't care. I took a few shaky steps forward, half expecting the scenery to ripple like a green screen, or the sky to blink off and reveal the library again. But everything held. A bird chirped from the tree line. Just one. Tentative. I started to cry. It hit me all at once how tense I'd been. How long I'd gone without sleep food sound. My body sagged with relief as the wind brushed against my arms like an old friend. Then I heard my voice. Behind me. Calm, soft, familiar. That wasn't the exit. I turned slowly. The house was there. Not behind a hill, not up a trail. It was stitched into the sky. Its frame towered above the treetops, blending into the clouds like it had always been there. The shingles shifted like scales. The windows blinked. It had no door now, just a gaping hole where a porch used to be pulsing faintly, like a mouth half asleep. My reflection stood beside the threshold, smiling, wearing my face, my posture. Even the same smudge of ash on the collar from the fireplace. It raised its hand, not to wave this time, to point. Behind me, I turned again and the field was gone. Just like that, I was back in the dining room, candlelight flickering, a plate of untouched food sitting in front of me, my chair still warm. I looked down. I was holding a fork. Had I been eating? Was this another trap? Another copy of a moment from another version of me? I stood up, walked to the mirror on the far wall. It didn't show the dining room. It showed me sitting in the chair, still eating, still chewing, still smiling. But I was over here. The reflection paused, looked up, and whispered, "You are no longer observing." The lights in the house went black. Total darkness. I didn't panic. Not this time. Because this time I finally understood what the house had been doing. It wasn't trying to scare me. It wasn't trying to trap me. It was trying to wear me. The voice, the face, the thoughts, the loops. The rules were never for me, they were about me. Each one designed to mold me, stretch me, erase what I was, and replace it with something more useful. And I had followed almost every one. Almost. Somewhere in that silence, I heard a different voice. Not mine, not the house's. Smaller, farther, like someone calling from the end of a tunnel. "Tyler, are you still in there?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know anymore. Was I? Or was I just what was left after the story stopped being mine? Then a light came on. A single lamp in the far corner of the room. Underneath it, a new chair. And in that chair, someone new. Not me. Younger. Shaking. Holding a black envelope. Their eyes scanned the room, slowly stopping at the fire, then at the note on the mantel. I recognized that look, that fear, that hope, that belief that maybe this was all still a game. And as they stepped deeper into the room, I felt the house stretch again. Not like walls bending, more like a mouth opening. And from somewhere inside me, or maybe outside me, I whispered, "Welcome to your first rule." The new arrival didn't see me. Of course they didn't. I didn't know if I had a body anymore. Not really. I still felt like myself. Still thought. Still remembered. Still reacted. But I hadn't seen my own reflection in a while. Not really mine. And now someone else had entered the house, which meant it was starting again. The cycle. I watched him, mid-20s, nervous energy hands in his hoodie pocket, like he didn't know what to do with them. He looked around the living room with a kind of polite confusion, like he'd walked into a stranger's home and wasn't sure if this was part of the deal. He moved toward the mantel. I knew what was there. The first note. The one I had found. Step inside. Lock the door behind you. He read it silently, then glanced at the front door. Still open behind him. That was a test. It always was. I watched him pause. Then reluctantly, he stepped back and closed the door. The lock clicked into place like it had been waiting. The house let out a low creak, and I felt it again. That shift, that tightening, like it had just taken a long breath in. He didn't hear it. He was already walking into the hallway, mumbling to himself. Okay, so, stay the night, $500, no big deal. He reached the first framed note. Rule 1, lock the door behind you. He read it aloud, then laughed nervously. That sound echoed too long in the hallway. I wanted to shout, to tell him to be quiet, to never read the rules out loud. But I couldn't speak, not in any way he'd hear. Instead, I watched the house shift around him. Not violently, not yet, but the bookshelf moved 3 inches to the left. The couch rotated slightly, imperceptibly. The light bulbs dimmed 3%. I knew the rhythm now. It was easing him in, letting him think this was all weird, sure, but harmless. He walked past the mirror. It didn't show him. Not at first. But as he moved on, the reflection caught up half a second later. His reflection smiled. He didn't. I remembered that. I remembered the fear when you realize your body isn't the only version of you in this place. I followed him, not because I had a choice. Because that's what I was now. The observer. The voice behind the glass. The pause in the mirror. The shift in the couch. It wasn't me anymore. I was function. He stopped at the fireplace and picked up the Polaroid that had appeared, his own face already smiling, even though he wasn't. He looked at it with a frown. What is this, a prank? The house did not like that. I felt it recoil. The lights in the kitchen flicked once hard. He flinched, then shrugged it off. That's how it always starts. You dismiss one strange thing, then another. By the time you realize something's wrong, the rules are already writing themselves around your behavior. That's when the new note appeared. On the fridge this time. He didn't see it yet, but I did. Rule 2. Do not ask who else is here. He was going to break that one. I could feel it. That nervous, jittery curiosity. That moment when he'd speak out loud to someone, even just himself, and the house would answer in ways he didn't expect. I remembered what happened when I broke that rule. The footsteps in the walls, the whispering under the couch, the way something with my voice stood behind the bathroom door. He would learn too. They all did. But not yet. Not this early. For now, the house wanted him calm, compliant. It would let him explore. Let him think he was ahead of the game. Let him believe the rules were a puzzle, that there was a pattern he could solve. And maybe there was. But if there was, I never found it. The house didn't wait long to test him. By what I think was the second hour, he'd already circled the ground floor twice, trying to find the kitchen again. I could see the frustration starting to build in his shoulders, in the way he muttered, "I literally just came through here and... okay. Weird flex house. I remember that exact feeling. Like the layout was just barely wrong enough to make you second-guess yourself." He paused in the living room, pulled out his phone, and tried to open Google Maps. Good luck. The screen flickered, locked up, then rebooted. He stared at the glowing Apple logo with this dazed look, like the phone had personally betrayed him. And that's when he said it. "Is someone else here?" Just a little too loud. Not a whisper, not a thought. Out loud, like a question, like it had been baited out of him. I felt it happen. The air in the house shifted. It wasn't wind, it never is. It's like gravity got bored and rolled over in bed. The floorboards sighed. From somewhere behind the walls, footsteps. Slow, barefoot, dragging slightly. He froze, then laughed. "Okay, good one. It always starts that way. That laugh. That desperate chuckle to convince yourself this is a prank, a stunt, a story someone else is writing." He didn't believe it yet, but the house did, because now it had permission. The fridge clicked. Its hum shifted up half a tone. The kitchen light turned off by itself. When he walked in, it clicked back on. The jar was there. The same jar I drank from, now sealed and waiting on the middle shelf. He opened the fridge, blinked at it, then shut the door. Didn't open it again. Smart. Too smart. The house doesn't like when people get ahead of its pacing. It wants you confused, on edge. It wants you to think you're winning until you ask the wrong question or break a rule you didn't even know existed. He sat down on the couch. The fire was out, but it relit on its own. Just a flicker, an offering. And then, the knock. 3 soft taps. He stood, walked to the front door. Still locked, still solid. The knock came again, but this time from behind him. He turned around just in time to see the hallway shorten. Just a few inches, but enough. I remember that too. The way space flexes in this place like muscle. The floor whispered. And on the wall by the mirror, he didn't notice this. Yet a new rule had appeared. Rule 3. If you hear a knock from both sides, answer neither. But it was already too late, because I heard him whisper, "Who's there?" just like I had. And that's when the mirror began to fog. Not with breath, with letters. One by one, like fingers tracing on condensation. Tyler, my name, not his, mine. And I felt it like a tug deep inside my chest. Like the house was trying to pull me back, to use me, to speak through me again. I pushed back, or at least I think I did. It's harder now, to tell where I end, where the walls begin. Harder to resist when it wants me close. The new guest, he stared at the mirror, confused. Then he laughed again, weaker this time. Okay, weird. I'm not Tyler, but good try. And the fog cleared, instantly. I almost sighed with relief. But the house didn't like that, because a moment later the fire turned blue. He didn't notice, but I did, and I knew what it meant. The house was going to test us both. Him because he wasn't breaking fast enough. Me because I still remembered what it meant to be human. He started leaving the lights on in every room. I watched him flip switches compulsively, even lamps that weren't plugged in. He kept saying things like, "I just like to see what's around me," or "Don't mind me just being paranoid." The house didn't mind, at first, but the light bulbs began to hum, just barely. A low buzz, like angry bees tucked behind glass. The brighter the room, the louder it got. He didn't seem to notice, but I did, because the sound matched a rhythm I knew. A signal. A pattern I'd heard in my own walls during the third night, when I stopped being a guest and started being whatever I am now. That was the night the house decided I should remember things I never lived. That was the night I stopped being able to trust my own voice. And now it was happening to him. Around midnight, or what looked like midnight, if you could believe the windows, he found the game room. That room doesn't appear for everyone, only when the house thinks you're stalling. The door was just there between the hallway and kitchen. He paused when he saw it. I saw his hand tremble on the knob, but he went inside. A table sat in the center of the room. Black felt top, brass corners, a deck of cards already dealt into 2 hands. The other chair was pulled out waiting. He didn't sit. He just stood there, breathing heavy, like the house had caught him in something private. And then the rules reappeared, this time on the wall behind the table. Rule 4. If the house invites you to play, you must finish the game. He turned startled, like the message had just written itself. Because it had. I watched the letters carve across the wall, like an invisible pen dragging through paint. He backed out of the room. The door closed behind him on its own. He stood in the hallway for a long time, didn't speak, didn't move, just stared at the door like he could will it away. Eventually he turned around and nearly bumped into me, or rather something wearing me, because now the house had decided to escalate. My body, my old body, was standing in front of him. Same hoodie, same shoes, same tired eyes. But it wasn't me, not really. It blinked wrong, too slowly, and when it smiled it showed too many teeth. He gasped, stumbled backward, hit the wall with a soft thud. The thing that looked like me didn't follow. It just said in a voice 3 notches too calm, "It's your move," then vanished. Just blinked out of existence like a glitch frame in a corrupted video. He fell to the floor shaking, started to cry. That's when I knew the house had found his crack. Because the house doesn't want to frighten you all at once. It wants to make you fragile. So when it finally breaks you, you don't even notice you've stopped being human. I tried to reach him, not physically, that's long gone, but in whatever way I can now. I whispered a thought into the walls. Don't trust the next voice you hear. I don't know if it reached him, but he wiped his face, stood up, and said aloud, "Okay, let's play." He opened the game room again, sat at the table, took his cards, and the door shut behind him. The house hummed with delight, and somewhere deep inside it, a new book opened. A new story, one with the name already written across the top. Not his name, mine. Again, I couldn't see inside the game room. That was intentional. The house doesn't let observers watch the games. That space is sealed not physically, but emotionally, symbolically. It's the one room where a guest's choices are still theirs for as long as they last, until they finish or fail. But I could hear things. The flick of cards, the scrape of a chair leg against the floor. Breathing that wasn't steady. A whisper that wasn't his. Then silence. And then the house sighed. Not a sound I could describe. It's not air. It's more like tension being released. Like it just pulled off a mask it didn't need anymore. When the door opened, the lights in the house dimmed 2 levels. The hallway felt colder. He stepped out, eyes glassy. His shirt was damp with sweat, and his hands trembled as he wiped them on his jeans. His mouth moved as if trying to speak, but no sound came. His voice had been taken. That happens sometimes. A penalty, a trade, A bargain he didn't realize he'd made until after the last card was played. He held a new object, a single red poker chip, pressed between his thumb and forefinger like it might burn him. On the chip, etched faintly, was a symbol, a circle bisected by a jagged vertical slash. I knew that mark. I had it too once. Not the chip on my wrist. It faded after I stopped trying to leave. He slipped the chip into his pocket and stumbled down the hallway past a mirror that no longer reflected him. It showed me, still, watching, waiting. Behind me in the mirror, something began to shift. A crack forming from top to bottom, not in the glass, in the image. Like the world it showed was breaking, not the mirror itself. And I could feel it. The house was losing integrity. Not everywhere, just around me. Around the parts of it I still influenced. The game had cost the guest his voice, but it had cost the house something too. It had shown him too much. I followed him as he entered the room with the fireplace again. He stood there breathing hard, looked up at the mantel where a note had appeared. Rule 13. You may burn one memory for clarity. He stared at the fire, then at the framed photo of himself that had appeared above it, smiling, but only in the eyes. I remember doing the same thing, watching a moment of my life be turned into decoration. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his back pocket, read it once, then tossed it into the fire. The flames flared green, and the house paused. Literally, for a full second everything stopped. No creaking, no light flicker, not even the low electric hum. It was like the house skipped a frame in reality. When it resumed, he was kneeling, crying, not from pain, from recognition. Burning that memory had worked. He remembered something now, something the house had tried to scrub clean. He looked up at the fire and whispered hoarsely, barely audible, "You're not the first." And I knew then he'd found the messages. The wall carvings, the old binders, the books with our names in them. He'd seen proof that this wasn't just his story. It was an archive, and he was part of it, just like I was. He stood slowly, looked into the mirror above the fireplace, and for the first time since he arrived, he smiled. Not the house's smile, his own, wounded, tired, but his. I whispered again, hoping he'd hear me. "Finish it before it finishes you." He turned, didn't say anything, didn't need to. We both knew what came next. The final phase, the final rule. The part where the house tries to rewrite everything and decides whether you become a voice in the wall or the next one to walk someone else through the door. I could feel it starting. The last shift. The one that doesn't look like anything at first, but you know it's happening because your thoughts start looping and the walls lose color and the air smells like wet copper and wood smoke even when nothing's burning. He felt it too. He kept blinking, rubbing his temples, shaking his head like he was trying to stay awake inside a dream. The poker chip in his pocket had begun to glow faintly. Not light, but warmth. A signal. The final rule was coming. I tried to reach out again, to think harder, push something through to him. I don't know what I am anymore. Not a ghost, not a memory. A shadow tethered to circuitry and rules I helped write by failing. But he was still himself, and I was terrified the house would erase that soon. He walked into the dining room, sat at the table. In front of him a piece of paper that hadn't been there before. Plain white typed words. Final rule. If you hear your voice say, "It's over," don't believe it. He read it aloud. That was a mistake. The house heard it too. Everything stilled. And then from the other room, "It's over." His voice, but too steady, too loud. "No hecho." He froze. I remembered this moment. For me, it had come from the hallway, For another before me, it had come from the kitchen sink. That phrase always arrives before the house attempts full integration. Before it tries to overwrite, you lock you into the same loop as the rest of us. Before you stop thinking your thoughts and start thinking its. He stood up fast, grabbed the poker chip and held it like a weapon. Not yet, he whispered. I'm not ready. The house didn't like that. The lights went out, all of them. The fire snapped dark. The windows turned solid black. No moon, no light, no sound. And then the voices began. Not just his, mine. Dozens of them, all whispering from the corners of the room. Overlapping, folding, unspooling. You've already lost. You were never real. Just give in. It's so much easier. And then right behind him, me again. It's over. But this time he didn't turn around. He ran, blind, through the dark. The house twisted around him, walls sliding into place, doorways vanishing, gravity tilting, trying to herd him into one of the reset loops. It almost worked, until he found the library. I don't know how. The door only appears for those who've begun remembering. And clearly he had. He slammed the door behind him and flicked on the single lamp. The books greeted him, shelf after shelf, each spine labeled with a name and a cycle count. He scanned quickly, and there on the far left wall his name. Not once, not twice, 3 times. His breath hitched, because if the library had already written 3 volumes of you, it meant the house had tried to take you 3 separate ways. That's rare. Most people break by the second. I remember standing in the same spot, looking at my shelf, seeing 5, knowing the 5th would be the last. He opened the first book, flipped through, saw the same sentences I had seen. He enters willingly. He breaks rules. He regrets nothing. But something new appeared at the bottom of the page. Subject currently resisting narrative overwrite. Probability of survival, 11%. He smiled. 11% wasn't 0. He dropped the book, pulled the poker chip from his pocket, held it above the candle flame beside the desk. It started to melt, not into wax, into light. And as it pooled in his palm, the voices around him began to scream. The library shook. Dust fell from the rafters. And in the mirror behind the desk, the version of me still trapped, still watching, smiled. Because I knew what he had just done. He had chosen his ending, not the one the house wrote. The house didn't scream, not exactly. It groaned. Long, low, guttural. Like something that had never known pain suddenly realizing it was capable of feeling. The walls flexed. The bookshelves wept ash. Some of the spines cracked open and bled light. He stood in the center of it, all my successor, or maybe my savior, with the melted poker chip pulsing in his palm like a tiny sun. It wasn't warm. It was honest. That's the only word I have for it. It cut through the rot and rules and reflections like truth. The house hated it. You could feel it in the way the library began collapsing, not physically, but conceptually. Some shelves turned to shadows. Others curled into loops, repeating endlessly in the same 3 feet of space. The lighting lost depth like someone had flattened the 3rd dimension into paper. And then came the mirrors. One by one they rose from the floor, from the walls, from behind the books. Each one filled with a version of him. Not distorted, just adjusted. Slightly more compliant, a little more tired, a touch more willing to stay. In one he was smiling too hard. In another, he looked broken. In a third, he was turning into something featureless. They surrounded him, all whispering, "Stay. You were always meant for this. The rules are you now." But he gritted his teeth. clenched the melted chip into a fist. Then he did something I didn't expect. He spoke. Loud, clear. No, just that. And everything cracked. I felt it in the foundation. The mirrors split. The library screamed, not with voice, but structure. Geometry buckled. Language peeled off the books like flaking paint. The binding of his name unraveled mid-air, every letter disintegrating before it hit the floor. The light from his hand exploded outward in a pulse, and every version of me, every echo trapped behind glass, behind fire, behind paper, jerked back like we'd all been struck across the face. I could think again. I could feel again. The wall I hadn't even known existed between thought and reaction broke, and with it the loop. He looked into the mirror in front of him, my mirror, and for the first time saw me looking back. Not the house's version, not a mask. Me. I didn't know what to say, but he did. He reached out, touched the glass, and whispered, "You can come with me." That phrase, those 6 words, hit like thunder in a sealed room. The house screamed. Lights flared, and behind him the library door burst open. On the other side, the field. Grass, wind, real morning. Not a trick, not a reset. The exit the house had always lied about. And he ran. Didn't wait. Didn't look back. Tried to follow. My hand touched the glass and passed through. And just like that, I stepped out. Not into the room. Not into his world. But forward. The mirror shattered behind me, but it didn't fall. The shards turned to vapor, and I didn't care. Because for the first time since I'd spoken my name aloud inside that house, I was free. We stood there in silence. Me and the guy who'd made it out, who somehow finished the house's game without losing himself like I did. The sky above us wasn't fully morning, not quite. It was gray with hints of orange, like dawn was still deciding whether it wanted to arrive. The wind carried the scent of grass and something older, old paper, old stories, like we were standing on the cover of a book that had just been closed. The house behind us had gone still, no longer snarling with whispers or reshaping itself around our footsteps. Just quiet. Its edges were already beginning to blur, like it was losing its grip on reality, retreating. Its windows became dark patches. The door faded, and then the whole structure began to fold inward, not crashing, not collapsing, but gently erasing itself. He didn't say anything, just stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the house vanish, like it was a movie he didn't enjoy, but couldn't look away from. I turned to him. "You still have your name?" I asked. He shook his head. "It's somewhere, just not with me right now." That made sense. It took me years to remember mine. Tyler. I still don't know how long I was in there. Time bends in the house, then flattens. Sometimes it erases, but he hadn't been taken like that. He made it out earlier than I did, on his own terms. "I thought I'd be trapped forever," I said. He looked at me with something like understanding. "I thought I'd disappear." "You almost did." He nodded. "So did you." That silence again, big and soft. Then he reached into his pocket and held out the poker chip, or what was left of it. It wasn't glowing anymore. The red had gone pale, almost pink, and the slash down the middle had faded to a faint scar on its surface. "What happens now?" he asked. I took the chip from his hand and felt nothing. No weight, no warmth, just an object. Finally, just a thing. Now I said we wait, until the house finds someone else. He raised an eyebrow. "And what we warn them, if we can, if they listen." He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No one ever listens at the beginning. No, But maybe at the end, he looked up at the sky. Does it always feel this quiet after? It's not the world that's quieter. It's you. He took that in, and I knew what he was really asking. Would the fear come back? Would the rules follow? Would the voice, my voice, ever call out to him again in the dark? We didn't need to say it out loud. We knew the answer. Yes. Always yes. The house doesn't let go. It just steps back, waits, like a book on a dusty shelf waiting to be picked up again. Waiting for someone else to think it's just a game, a prank, a night for $500. But I had learned something he hadn't yet, a final truth. You don't beat the house, you just escape before you become part of it. And even then, some part of it leaves with you. You lie back on the grass. The morning is thin and strange but peaceful. The sky has stopped flickering. The world is no longer made of mirrors and rules and shifting walls. Just cool air, just open sky, just silence. Not the suffocating kind. The kind that feels earned. The other boy, what's left of him, sits nearby. You hear him breathing slowly. You feel your own chest rise and fall. And for once it feels like yours again. Not something borrowed from a script. Not something monitored. Just breath. The field stretches in every direction. No fences, no footsteps, no house. It's gone now. Or maybe not. Maybe it's just out of sight, folded into some other field, wearing some other disguise. That's not your story anymore. You close your eyes. Your fingers curl into the grass like roots. And for the first time, in longer than you can remember, the earth doesn't push back. No whispers. No rules. No more reflections that move when you don't. You made it. And even if no one believes you, even if no one listens when you try to warn them, you'll never forget the first knock, the voice that sounded like yours, the rules you didn't understand until it was too late, and the one moment you realized you weren't going to die. You were going to stay. But now you rest. Because you left. And for once the house isn't watching. Not right now. Not tonight.